Hey guys, welcome back to another review video. As you can see, I have already completed the TT-02 chassis, and in this video I'm going to point out some of the areas that you need to pay extra attention when following the Tamiya instruction manual. So without further ado, let's start with the tool. So the tools that you will need to complete the kit: first you need the hex nuts wrench, so you need that to fasten the wheels to the chassis. Tamiya has already provided the hex nuts wrench in bag B, so you don't need to get that, but I'm sure a lot of you have already have a lot of these from previous RC build. Next, you will need nippers. So it's handy to have, and it's easy to cut out the part from all the sprues provided by Tamiya. Using the sharp tools will make your life a lot easier because it gives a much nicer cut and nicer or cleaner finishing. You can use the cheaper nipper. This only costs a few quid, but you might need to give the cut marks a little bit of polish. But make sure you get something like this and don't use a nail clipper. The nail clipper is not supposed to be for cutting models, so get yourself a cheap and cheerful nippers or the hobby grade nippers. Next, you will need a glass sanding stick, or you can use sandpaper as well. Some of the parts that you cut out from the sprues will require sanding to round the finishing. For example, the gears inside the diff case, you will make sure that they are all filed smoothly so that the gear could perform as they should. A craft knife is essential, but it's not a must-have for this build. A pointy pliers. This is essential again for you to pick up the small screws and the washers. You will need the JIS cross screw, because all the screw that comes with the Tamiya kit, they are all JIS standard, unless you're like myself. I have actually changed all the, well, I've changed 90% of the screws to the titanium hex screw, and I've got some spare ones. So these are by Ya Racing. So these are the screw with the hex head. So you will need the hex screwdriver, and then you will need these tools, which is another plier for popping the pivot balls, or you could use the standard plier as well, but this is a lot easier and less likely to cause damage to the pivot balls. This one you just need to be more careful. And then this, it really depends on which model of TT-02 you get. So with my Mitsubishi Evo 5, the holes for the 40 mount post holes are already pre-drilled, but in case of yours only have the dimple marking, you will need a reamer. So you can get one of these from eBay or your model store, and it's got the markings so you know how wide the hole is going to be. So very useful tool to have, especially if you plan to buy more body shell for your TT-02 or other RC model. And then you will need stud locker or Loctite. So mainly you just need to use this on a screw where it is screwing into a metal part. For example, the two screw that's holding the motor to the motor plate. So you need to put Loctite, and I think there's some other parts which is basically a metal screw going into a metal part. You will need this because otherwise, you know, from the vibration when you're running the RC, the screw might become undone. You don't want to lose your screw when you're out on the track, so it is essential to put Loctite. And then throughout the installation, it is good to have some extra washers or shims. So they are quite cheap to buy. It comes in all different sizes and different thickness. It will help to minimize any movement, especially on the steering mechanism. And last but not least, you will need this, which is for mounting your tire and rims. So this one, it comes with the Tamiya Mitsubishi Evo 5 kit. So it doesn't come with any foam. It's literally just the plastic wheels with the rubber tire. So I just mounted it like that. So if you're using the TT-02 as a shelf queen, all you need is just to mount the tire onto the rims and leave it be. But if you're planning to use this rubber tire and the wheels on the TT-02 to run or race the Tamiya Cup racing, then you definitely would need this. So this is to help you in gluing the tire onto the plastic rim. So basically, you just need to take up the lift, take out the adapter. So for the M cars, you need this adapter because the wheels are slightly smaller. This extra adapter, you don't really need this, so I'll remove it for now. So what you need to do is put your rubber tire onto the rim, and then you fit it inside this case and put the top lip over, and then when you press down, it will create a gap between the tire and the plastic rims like that. So you can then put the tire glue all around, and then when it's done, you just gently lift this up and wait for it to dry, or flip it upside down and repeat the same process on the other side. So you need to glue both sides of the tires to the rim, just like that, and then leave that aside to dry, and then move on to the next wheel. It's a very useful tool. I mean, you don't have to get one of these, but it's cheap and very easy to use, and it helps a lot rather than trying to pry it open one side like bit by bit, which would take forever. Okay, so that's pretty much all the tools that you will need if you want to build your TT-02 neatly, but they are not the tools that you must have in order to build this. I think the only tools that you really need is a pair of pliers, and everything else you could improvise with other stuff that you will find at home. So what I will do next is to show you some of the spare parts that I still have remaining, because I've used some of the option upgrade parts, as well as I've used my own hex screws, the titanium hex screw instead of the Tamiya JIS cross screw. So bear with me 1 second. So first, I've got some remaining parts from bag A, which has the Tamiya grease. I've used my own, so I didn't have to open that one. There's also a small Allen key for you to install the groove screw for the pinion gear as well. So that's also there. And then you have got some hardware, just different size and colors of screw that you will need to assemble the TT-02 if you're not using your own hex screw. And then here you have all the plastic bushing and the copper ones. So that's 16 of them. I have used my own ball bearings throughout. So you will need 1, 2, 3, 4 for the propeller shaft, and then inside or by the side of the front diff case you need another 2, and likewise another 2 at the back. And then where you have the each side of the dog bones, each side has 2, so that's 2, 4, 6, 8. So that's in total 16 bearings, and they are in 3 different sizes, as you can see. And in bag B I have the hex wrench, and also I left some hardware and the Tamiya spring because I'm using my own upgrade oil damper rather than the friction shocks. So these are a little bit useless. If you're building it as a shelf queen, then use this together with the plastic damper that comes with the TT-02 kit as well. And here I have also more hardware, some washers and double-sided tape, and the body clips. There's actually 2 different sizes, which I will point out later on in this video. And then in bag C, there's more hardware, different sizes, different color screws. They're all JIS screw with the cross head, and again more double-sided tape. And then in the box, obviously I still haven't built the rear wings, so I will need to assemble this and then mount it onto the Lexan body, and then paint the color on top as well. So I will use this for sure. And here you have a runner which has the motor mount for the smaller size motor. You have the servo saver, you have the air duct for the motor, but I'm using a yaw racing fan, so I don't need that. And then you have the receiver box. Again, I've decided to expose the receiver and the ESC, so I'm not using these either. And then there are some higher offset hex adapter for the wheels if you want to push the wheels further out. If you are using a wider body, you can use them as well. And then here you have a spare bumper mount. I've already used one here, but because this runner is on repeat, so you get a spare one. And then the rest of the parts, they are the friction shock body, so all of this, as well as the preload ring for the spring. So it's entirely up to you if you want to use them or not. And here, runner C, I have the 2 propeller shaft as spares. I'm using my own titanium one, and also there are the propeller cups that I'm using my own as well, so they are just spare. And then this is runner A. I still have one spare of the steering link, which is this one right here. This one. So there is a spare one, and there's also 2 of the higher offset hex adapter for the rear wheel. So if you have the Porsche RSR, I think it's called, the rear wheel sticks out further to accommodate the wider rear arches, so you will need to use those. And obviously if you want to use this, you need a slightly longer drive hub as well, which doesn't come with this one because this is a standard what do you call it, the track space. It doesn't stick out further. If you want to use the higher offset cap, you will need the longer pins for the rear wheels. And one last thing is the tube for the antenna. I'm not using this. So that's all the kind of spare parts that I still have left in and outside of the box. So what I will do next is to show you guys the things that you need to be aware of when assembling the kit. So let's start from the beginning. So right here for step 5, the pin parts, which is D15, you can remove it. You don't have to use it. If you remove D15, you actually could get a higher steering angle, but then you will need to make sure you set the endpoint on your receiver if you have a kind of, not a very basic one, but a slightly more advanced transmitter or radio, then you could set the endpoint. Reason being, if you remove the parts D15, you could get a lot more steering angle, but when it is oversteer, the dog bone, it might fall out. You don't want that to happen, so make sure you set it excuse me, make sure you set the endpoint so that it limited the travel for the steering and keep the dog bone in place. And then step 6 is basically you assemble the front and rear differential housing, and I've highlighted the cross parts. So because these are molded plastic, so in between of the cross you will see a mold line or the sim line. So make sure you file the cross so that when you fit the differential gear, the gear will spin smoothly. So very important, if you want to make sure your TT-02 runs smoothly, file the sim line, and that's for front and rear diff case. And also for all of these little gears inside, when you cut them out from the sprue, make sure you file the cut marks smoothly, otherwise the stick out nubs might catch with the other gear and then your diff gear will not spin smoothly. And just to mention, when you're fitting the 4 screws for the diff case, make sure you do cross section. Last thing you want is to fit this gear slightly slanted, and then the whole thing will just, it won't spin like horizontally, it will warp. So do horizontal 2 and then the vertical 2. Next we have the pivot balls that you could pop in by hand. It's very easy if you're using the one provided in the kit, which is a plastic one. I have changed these to the metal one because they are hard wearing and it kind of make the traveling or the moving of the balls smoother. So you can get the Tamiya 54559, which is a metal version of the plastic ball. And then here for these B13 parts, again it's similar to the cross. You need to make sure you file the sim line so that the suspension arm would rotate smoothly. And likewise for the rear one, you do the same filing for the sim. And then for the motor mount, So if you're using the 540 motor or simply using the one provided inside the kit, make sure you use the correct holes on the motor mount. So you'll be using the hole 22 and the one directly opposite, so make sure. And then the next step is the pinion gear and the spur gear. So here on the instruction, it tells you to leave that 10mm gap when you're setting the pinion gear with the set screw or the grub screw. The best thing to do is either follow that instruction, or when you have the two gear, or when you have the motor mount slotted in and fastened, then you could use the grub screw, untighten it, and then just slightly move the pinion gear so that it lined up perfectly in the middle of the spur gear rather than on one side and the other side. The most efficient way is right in the middle of the spur gear. And then here again is similar to what we mentioned earlier. You just need to make sure you file the sim line so that the suspension arm would move freely. And then on to step 14. It's just basically to remind you, fit these two screws first and then the two vertical ones. It's just easier to make sure you mount the bumper mount correctly, so bear in mind with that. And step 15, again, file those sim lines to make sure the suspension arm will move freely. And then step 16 is pretty much the repeat of step 14, so put those screws first before the vertical two. Step 17, again, the steering knuckle, file those 4 points so that the knuckle can spin freely. Step 18, for the part A6, make sure you file them to ensure they are sitting perfectly flat onto the pivot board. And don't forget the part A10. I accidentally forgotten to put 1, but then you will find out very quickly, because without the part A10 and you put the screw to the bottom to go up to the knuckle, it will not hold. The whole thing will just drop, so you need that to stop the whole thing from moving. And here, both ends of the dog bones, make sure you file the sim line, otherwise it might catch either side of the cups. You don't want that. And here is just to remember the parts that you need to put into the bottom of the knuckle, similar to that small plastic ring. Make sure you don't miss them. And then here again is similar to this. For the two dog bones, make sure you file them, otherwise they will not spin or rotate smoothly inside the drive cups. And here you can see the standard friction spring. I didn't assemble any of this because they're pretty useless. Jumping to step 24, so the B11, they are plastic, so make sure when you are driving the screw, the MB1, once the screw has drive all the way in, stopped, Otherwise, if you keep forcing the screw to turn, you will end up compressing this ball, and then it might expand sideways. So these steering arm won't be moving smoothly and freely. So remember, don't press this pivot ball too hard to make it deformed. Always check that after you fitted the screw through, all the bits are still moving freely. And on to step 25. Here, make sure you include or insert the MB6 washer. But in order to make the steering mechanism with less warps or less vibration so that your TT-02 could drive straighter, I would recommend you to add another washer. So you need to buy your own extra washer to add on top right here and there before the screw goes down. So there will be a washer on the top and at the bottom of this part here, and it's on for both sides. Very important to add this if you want to make sure your TT-02 drives straight. And again, the pink highlighted is just to show that don't over tighten the screw, otherwise the pivot ball might expand because it's plastic, and you need to ensure all of this steering mechanism could move freely. Then on to step 27. So here I have actually turned these parts upside down to allow more clearance at the bottom. You could use these in this way, but it depends on the type of servo you use. Mine has a small stick out bit on the side, so I have to turn this upside down. It will still work, it will still hold the servo tightly onto the chassis. So it's down to you what type of servo you use, but for me I need to turn them upside down. And also why I painted that blue is because by having these two parts upside down, it will slightly lift the servo a little bit higher, so that these blue parts is actually horizontal to the steering length, which I'll show you here. Right here, this bar is more level. Can you see it? Okay, moving on. Step 28. This part, it doesn't apply to me because even though I use the provided Tamiya ESC, which is hobby wing actually, the switch doesn't fit onto this bracket. So for my installation, I didn't manage to install the on-off switch to this fan mount. My on-off switch actually has a slot attached right next to the ESC, which I will show you. So this is the ESC, and the on-off switch is right next to it, and there's actually a slot specifically for you to slot the on-off button right next to the ESC without double-sided tape or screw. It's very nicely designed. Moving on, this is just to flag up that I did make a mistake. I thought they're both using MA2 to start with, but actually only that screw is MA2. This other one, you need MB1, which is a slightly longer screw, so that is kind of fasten all of these things together, because the gear cover for the motor, you need the longer screw to hold this bit, which is part of the motor shield, and then you also need to clamp the gear cover and then linked to the top chassis, so you need a longer screw on this side. And here by the steering servo on the length, I would recommend you to add 2 shims before you put the MB4 screw, just to minimize the vibration around the steering mechanism. And step 30, I've already shown you with the tire mount tool, which is very useful for mounting your own tire. Or you could buy the plastic wheel that comes with pre-glued tire and insert. I think most of us would use those tires, especially when we are planning to do the race with the TT-02. And then step 30 is just to remind you, don't forget to put the small pin, which is MA7, otherwise the wheel is not going to spin the way as they should. And likewise for the rear wheels, don't forget those pins. And step 33, the 2 screws I've highlighted, because the body post, this is made of, or they are made of, kind of PC parts, so it's very soft plastic. So when you drive the screw in, once the whole screw is traveled in, then stop, otherwise you end up rounding the holes inside. It's very easy to make that mistake, so that's why I have marked it up there to show you guys. And likewise, this is for the front body post. Again, drive the screw gently, and once the screw has traveled all the way in, stop. And it is the same thing for mounting the front bumper mount and the foam. Drive these 2 screws gently in. And step 37 is basically to show you how to mount the body. So inside the, which one is it? I think it's in bag C, where you will have this bag with the body clips. There's also 2 plastic O-rings. So what you need to do is, once you set the bottom clips for the rear and the front, for the rear you need to add the rubber O-ring on top of the clips so that it doesn't scratch or damage your clear rear window on your Lexan body. The front, it doesn't matter, because you're going to have your bonnet painted, and you could easily just put some tape on the underside to protect the scratching from the metal pins. But on the rear, because the position of the post, that actually comes up around the rear window, so you don't want to scratch the clear window, so put the plastic O-ring on top of the bottom setting pin, and then you put the body on, and then you need to put the 4 upper pins. So altogether you need 8 of these position pins and 2 of the rubber O-ring for the 2 posts. And I made a extra note here. Inside this bag there's actually 2 different type of body clips, or the E-clips. So there's 3 smaller ones. I think you only need 2, but they gave you 1 extra. So the smaller 2 goes to the front, because that's right where the bonnet is, and then you could use this slightly larger one at the back by the window, because I don't think people care too much using the larger clips at the back. You definitely don't want to use the larger clips for the front too. So just to make you aware, there's actually 2 different sizes of clips. And I think that's all the markings I have. So here is just to show you, you could swap the rear arm, suspension arm, to adjust the longer and shorter wheelbase. And you could also flip the steering knuckle and the rear upright upside down to increase the ground clearance if you are tuning your TT-02 to do rallying. And here, just to show you the standard 540 motor mount and the smaller motor, the 380 motor mount, which is also provided in the kit. And body mount, you could fit the mounting post on the opposite direction. So for the Mitsubishi Evo 5, you can see the post goes behind the suspension tower, and for the rear it goes before, so it's using the closer to the center for the mounting. But depends on the body shell, you could use the opposite side, so you just flip this to go in from this way, and also the front to go in on this way as well, to kind of increase the clearance. So it really depends on what Lexan body you choose. And here, just to show you the option parts that you could use for the receiver case. I am not using them because I like the receiver to expose. And that's pretty much it, what I want to kind of make you guys aware if you're planning to install the TT-02. So all of the markups, they are fairly important if you want to make sure your TT-02 do run smoothly and efficiently. So I hope you guys will find all of these marked up useful and make sense. If not, then feel free to drop me a comment in the comment box below, and I will do my best to answer your questions. So before I go, I would like to show you guys the fully built TT-02 chassis, and this is just a quick look. In my next video, once I painted up the Evo 5 body, put all the stickers or the decals, then I will do a full review of the TT-02 Evo 5 before I will start the next build, which is either the another TT-02 but with a lot more option parts or adjustable parts, because this one is pretty much stock. There's no adjustment on the camber or the toe in for front and rear. And yeah, so the second TT-02 would be more of a tune-up version. I mean, this is kind of more closer to stock, albeit I've changed out the suspension to the oil damper shocks instead of the friction damper, and I've also changed the drive shaft to aluminium with the aluminium drive cups. But those are very basic, and also I changed out all of the ball bearings instead of the plastic bushing and the copper bushing ring that provide in the kit. So it's still pretty stock. So if you guys are interested in tuning up your TT-02, then make sure you subscribe and keep following my channel. Pretty sure I will release the second TT-02 chassis with the upgrade parts. So hopefully you guys will enjoy the journey with me on that one. And then there should be another video about building the TT-01E as well. I have the TT-01E in new kit form because I would like to build another one now that I am a little bit older, with more skilled in model buildings and a better understanding of, you know, all the mechanism and the electrical wirings for the RC cars. So I just want to rebuild the TT-01E after the two TT-02. And then if you guys still interested in running a faster touring car, then I also have the TRF-421, which is the proper track weapon for me to attend the Tamiya Racing Cup. And that will be a very expensive touring car chassis kit. And no doubt you will see an unboxing video of the TRF-421 as well as the upgrade parts. Well, not quite the upgrade parts, because the TRF-421 is pretty much track ready, so it would just be some of the additional option parts that I would fit onto the TRF-421. And yeah, so stay tuned, and hopefully we'll see you guys in the upcoming videos as well. So coming back to this TT-02, just a very quick view. Obviously I've changed all the screws, or majority of the screws, to the hex titanium screws. I still have to use some of the Tamiya JIS screws because they are bespoke screw for this kit, and I can't find the titanium or just a standard replacement hex screw for them, so I have to use these ones. And it is the same for the suspension as well. I have to use the standard ones provided in the kit, but the rest of them, they are all titanium hex screw, which is what I prefer. So the kit is relatively easy to build. You just need to be a bit careful and patient and follow the instruction, and you will have no issue building this very successfully. This is my Racing cooling fan that I have installed in addition, rather than just relying the air scoop to duct air when your car is moving. And yeah, I mean, overall it looks pretty neat with some of the blue color on the aluminium parts. I think it's pretty cool. So it's mainly the front and rear oil dampers, the Tamiya TRF servo horn, and then the main center drive shaft, or the propeller shaft, which is made by Tamiya, and same as the front and rear propeller cup, they're also by Tamiya. And here you can see the plastic brake disc, which is part of the hex adapter for the wheel, and you have them at the back as well. So when I paint the body, I might remove the brake disc or the rotor, and I'll paint it in a silver color as well. But obviously, if you have a bit of spare cash, I would recommend you to remove this plastic hex mount, which is this one with the brake disc, and just install the aluminium hex adapter with the screw, so it fastened to the actual driving pin. Because with the plastic one, once you lift up when you remove the wheel, you lift up that hex mount, very likely the pin might fall, and you definitely don't want to lose that pin, because otherwise your wheel will not spin properly. Whereas if you upgrade it to the aluminium hex mount, the hex mount nut actually have a tiny screw that fasten the hex to the the drive pin, so it's unlikely, very unlikely, that the pin would fall off after that. So it's an essential upgrade. But this is a kind of close to stock build of the TT-02, so I'm using the standard plastic ones here. But in the next TT-02 build, you will definitely, well, you won't see this, because the next one will have the hex drive. And here I would like to show you guys the steering mechanism. So I've added a lot of shims around to make sure there's no movement. Even when I shake this, there's not a lot of movement around the steering. So without the shims, there's actually quite a lot of movement, whereas with the shims or the washers, this whole thing becomes, I won't say the word rigid, but it just, there's a lot less movement. So it will ensure your TT-02 will drive straight without too excuse me, without too much of the steering correction. So it is very essential to add shims onto these steering mechanism. So pretty much from here all the way to there. And that's a little bit trickier to add the shims, because you need to find the different sizes, different thickness of the shim in order to get it working like this. So that's almost no movement, both sideways or up and down is definitely, there's no movement. So this is ideal. And the other thing that I think is the most trickiest part is to try and keep everything here like nice and tidy. So obviously you have your servo right here, and then I've stuck the receiver on top of the servo, and I have the ESC, the on-off button, and then the motor and the cooling fan all together. And it did take me a little while to kind of tidy it up, because I don't want a very messy chassis. I would like to have the touring car as neat as possible. So it does require some planning, some cable routing, and then rerouting in order to get to this result, which is very tidy to my standard. And obviously your battery will run here with the plug coming out on this way, and then will plug directly onto this plug. What else? I think that's pretty much it. So here on the underside you can see all of the hex screws that I used. And yeah, it is a fairly straightforward build if you just be patient and follow the instruction. Nothing's too difficult. As I mentioned, the only two difficult parts are trying to keep all the cable runs neat and tidy, and the second thing is to add all the shims or washers to the steering mechanism to minimize the movement. And apart from that, everything is pretty straightforward. And last thing to check, when you have the car on the ground, make sure the four wheels are touching the ground at the same time as well, so you know the chassis is not tilted one way or tilt one corner. Here you can see the suspension, they are quite firm as well. It's very nice. Oh, one thing I just remember. So for the suspension setting, regardless you are using the oil damper shock or the standard plastic friction shocks that comes with the kit. So on the instruction, I think they asked you to install they asked you to use the upper hole, which is here, instead of the one inner for the front and rear. Like that. Or is it the other way around? I can't remember. But what I found, and this is from my past experience, is if you want your car to kind of drive smoother, you have the front suspension, you screwed it into the slightly lower hole of the two. There's two here, one here that you can see, the other one is the one I'm using. So use the lower hole at the front, but do the opposite for the rear. So here you can see I'm using the upper hole and left the lower hole unused, like that. So what I'm trying to do is to set the shocks more or closer to vertical, so closer to this way than leaning down. So that will ensure your car drive smoother, especially around cornering. So it's optional, and obviously you could test out all the different positions for the shock to dial it into the way that you like the most. And for the lower link or the suspension link points here, you could only use the one at the front, which is the upper one. My shocks will not let me screw it onto the bottom hole, just because there's limitation right here. So also the Tamiya instruction have asked you to use the upper hole as well, and that is the same for the front. So use the upper hole. And I think that's about it. Just a quick look of the TT-02, and I will talk more about in depth in the next video when I get everything else painted up for the body, the spoilers and all the decals. And there's also some decals to apply onto the chassis as well. And yeah, I think that's enough for now, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video of the assembled TT-02 Mitsubishi Evo 5. And if you've got any questions, then feel free to comment in the comment box below, and I'm hoping I will see you guys again in my upcoming videos. And for now, take care, and I hope you guys will enjoy building or modifying your TT-02 as well. Take care, guys. Bye for now. Hey guys, you guys still here? I just remember one thing, which is to show you guys what it looks like with the Lancer body mounted, even though I haven't had it painted. But I would like to show you guys, you know, what it looks like once you have the body on, and also how to set the height on the mounting post. So let me just grab the Lancer body. Right, here it is, the unpainted Evolution 5. It doesn't even have the rear wing assembled at the moment, but doesn't matter. I want to show you guys how it is mounted. So, as I mentioned, you need 4 of these positioning pins, 2 at the front, 2 at the rear. And the rear, make sure you put the plastic O-ring so it won't scratch the rear windscreen. So have that mounted like that. Let me lift it up. So this is what it looks like. I can set the body to sit even lower if you want to slam the car, but then you will need to make sure your suspension is set to very, very hard so that there's not much of suspension travel. Whereas if you are planning to have a lot of suspension travel, so make sure you set the bottom pin slightly higher in order to allow some suspension travel for the wheels. So I'll demonstrate. So here there's still a lot of travel before the tire would hit the wheel arch. So once you have that painted, you definitely don't want the tire to keep rubbing the wheel arches, as it will take out the paint and then you end up having a clear spot here. So make sure you set enough suspension travel before the tire would reach the wheel arch. And this is the same for the rear. And obviously, if I just imagine if my body is set a lot lower, when I compress it, it's going to hit the plastic arch. See it? So make sure you give it enough suspension travel. I think it looks pretty good with this Evolution 5 body, especially once it's painted up. And that's it from me. See you in the next one, guys. Bye again.